A very good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're from. My name is Glenn Lim, Senior Program Director of MedTech Innovator Asia Pacific. And we are very excited to hold our ninth webinar this year on building winning teams, attracting talent, and forming effective MedTech advisory boards. And this is part of our webinar series that we do annually for our APAC and US market access cohorts. And today I'm really excited to have with me two amazing gentlemen. AJ, partner of the Mullings Group, our talent partner in APAC, as well as a 2024 alumni, Sujit, CEO of Guider Surgical. So we will be live streaming this on LinkedIn and on YouTube for the first hour. And then subsequently, in the next 30 minutes, we will jump off the live stream and go into a Q&A session with our cohort companies. So without further ado, maybe we'll just invite AJ to give a short introduction about yourself and what do you do?
Thank you, Glenn, and thanks to the MedTech Innovator APAC team. This is my second webinar in the series, and I'm really excited to be back. I have to say I'm a big fan of the webinar series that you project, and I think really high quality across the MedTech APAC program, so I'm a big fan. Yeah, a quick background on myself. So I'm sort of an atypical headhunter. I come with almost 22 years of med tech and med device industry experience. Similar to actually Sujit, which I'm always proud of saying, I'm an ex-Johnson & Johnson guy myself. That's where I started my career. Not a lot of people who know me in Singapore know that I'm originally American. I grew up in the US, started my career in the US. From 2011 onwards, started my APAC journey, lived China, India, Singapore, ran P&L. So I actually come from the industry and have kind of lived in experience. Now, about 2 years now, I've been president and partner for it's a US MedTech med device recruitment firm, very well known in the US and Europe, 30 plus years of recruitment. We've placed over 9,000 individuals in 900 companies. I run the Asia Pacific region for the Mullings Group. And I'll say maybe the last comment is we kind of manage a mixed portfolio. We work with large strategics like the J&Js, Baxter, Philips's of the world, but we're incredibly passionate about the young medtech segment. And specifically, we get involved all the way from seed to scale, but watching young companies grow and eventually whatever their success outcome is, right? Exit, build, that's the real passion that we sort of index on. And that's the area that I really love playing in. So that's a little bit about me. But
No, glad to have you on board, AJ. I think we've worked together a number of years, and I'm really glad you're here. And of course, with us today, we have Sujit. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and Guider Surgical.
Well, thank you, Glenn, and it's a real pleasure to be here as part of this webinar with you and Ajay. And as you mentioned, I'm part of the 2024 cohort, so super excited to be having this conversation. Just to give you a little bit of background at my end, I've been in medical device business for more than 18 years, and a large chunk was spent in J&J for 8 years, where I led account management team. I built commercial teams on enabling technologies across the orthopedic and general surgery sector. And I've had the privilege of leading these teams and building these from scratch and really working with every kind of customer possible in the US. So some of the largest health systems in the US, the government, the Department of Defense, the VA, ambulatory surgery centers or outpatient surgery centers, physician groups, group purchasing organizations. So I have really deep commercial expertise in bringing medical device and really commercializing that across a wide range of customer profiles. And before J&J, I was in a company called Synthes, which was acquired by J&J, one of the largest acquisitions in medtech history. And I started my career more outside of medical devices. So I'm an engineer by training. I spent a few years doing R&D. I was part of the Human Genome Project. I worked at a company called Affymetrix, which was really the first company to commercialize large-scale gene sequencing. And in between, I did an MBA. So I've been all over the map. And that has helped me a lot in working with wide diverse teams and really making companies successful. So I've been part of Guider. I'm leading Guider right now for 3 years. Guider is focused on improving surgical accuracy for orthopedic applications. And just like many companies, probably in this cohort, and by the way, congratulations to all the companies that are part of this cohort. It's a very, very competitive dynamic, and it really speaks a lot about the quality of companies that are making in the final cut. But just like many of these companies in this cohort, we are commercializing now in both US and Australia.
Mm.
Look forward to this conversation.
No, thank you so much. And I think just for everyone's benefit as well, you are an Australian company that's expanding to the US, right?
That's correct. So the company was founded in Australia. A lot of our manufacturing is, in fact, most of our manufacturing currently is in Australia. All our R&D is in Australia currently, but we are commercializing and expanding into the US. So we are building commercial teams both in the US and Australia.
Okay. Yep. So I think that's just some background on one of the reasons why we've also invited Sujit to join this panel to share his expertise on and insights on a company from Asia that's expanding to the US. So I think maybe during this webinar itself, we will cover really three main topics. So the first one will be on talent acquisition. Second one will be on talent management before we cover a little bit more on advisory boards itself. So maybe let's start off with talent acquisition, right? So I think we all know that attracting top talent on a startup's budget can be really, really challenging. So Sujit, from your experience, kind of what do you think are some of the good strategies or best practices that you have personally found, I think, more effective?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I share the pain of many other startups, right? How do we attract the best talent we want to at a more shoestring budget, particularly for early stage medtechs?
Mm.
In my experience, really, it's a mix of different strategies for retaining or hiring talent. And I like to think about this as a process. It's a three steps, if you will. One is how do we source the right talent?
Mhm.
And the second is how do we engage them and get them excited and really genuinely connect with your mission and what you're trying to do? And the third is how do we structure beyond compensation? How do we structure the position so that it really becomes attractive?
Mhm.
And so maybe if you allow me, I'll spend a couple of minutes just talking about each of these buckets in my experience. So when it comes to sourcing, certainly I've used multiple strategies. Some of my hires and some of our hires have been all about our network. So, we have used the J&J network, for example, to hire our chief commercial officer. We have used a network of MedTech CEOs. I'm a member of MedTech CEO group, similar to MedTech Innovator group. There's similar to that network. And a hire that is actually starting next week it came from a referral from one of the MedTech CEOs. I've also worked very closely with Ajay and the Mullings Group in hiring a commercial person in Australia. And really what drives this different strategies is an understanding of where we are. For example, where is my network, my own network strong, or where is my company's network strong? So my deep commercial expertise, in the US makes it easy for me to get the right talent, for example, on the commercial side. But I recognized it's not the same when it comes to Australia. And that's where I worked with Ajay in sourcing the right talent in Australia. So we really have to look at, where our strengths are. And I have to say, we also have used recently LinkedIn and other strategies. And you need to build that comprehensive approach and cast a wide net to source talent. But once you've done that, and once we have identified the right talent, I think the most important step is how do we get them excited about the position? And one of the interesting strategies that we have employed both in the US and Australia, in fact, for both our commercial hires, has been to start with a fractional consultant role
Mhm.
with very well-defined objectives. And what that allows us to do is to really assess mutually. This is, hiring is a mutual process.
Yep,
So
yep.
both sides are mutually assessing, is this the right team to work with? And it gives the candidate the opportunity to understand the company dynamics, the technology risks, where are we with our funding cycle, with our cash flow, but very importantly, really understand our mission, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it gave me an assessment of how, this person would work with the rest of the team. Is he or she really built for startup experience? So, for example, our chief commercial officer came with deep expertise in a large company, and this was a process we did for more than 6 months. But both of us gained confidence that, okay, this is the kind of role that he would succeed in a startup environment. And then, once you do that, you go on to the offer stage. And this is where I would say, besides compensation, there are several other factors that make a difference. So, for example, in the case of our chief commercial officer, what he was truly excited was no bureaucracy, fast decisions, a lot of empowerment. He's the decision maker for so many things, and just no politics. The
Mm-hmm.
whole experience is very different, right? And the excitement of building something from scratch, commercializing an innovative product, all those things matter. And when you put all of those things together, then compensation becomes less of an issue. It has to be competitive. Let's be real. Your compensation still matters, but it becomes less of a barrier. There's a lot more flexibility. So in this case, he was willing to go more on equity, take more risk on the equity side, and be more flexible on the cash compensation side. And this worked out very well. And similar process ongoing with Ajay in Australia. And we are very close to finalizing an offer with a commercial person in Australia.
Yeah, and I think when we caught up, I think in LSI Asia in Singapore, I think a story that you shared with us that I think resonated very strongly was when you find that right person, this person was also the one that helped you with your FDA, and congratulations on getting it earlier this year as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's another great example. So definitely attend when you attend conferences, and while we as CEOs are all focused about raising capital and meeting investors, frankly, one of the biggest values of attending these conferences like LSI, MedTech, which are focused on MedTech startups, is actually meeting talent. So I'm
Mm.
always thinking about my needs for the next 12 to 36 months and saying, even if I don't need a person right now in this particular role,
You need them.
out for who is building that network. And so at LSI, one of the LSI dinners, I met a regulatory consultant, a very different hire. And when it came to certain, I assessed our own regulatory strengths, and it became clear I needed the right person. I actually reached out to this person, and it turned out to be one of the most crucial decisions in getting us regulatory approval. So to me, that process of engaging with talent
Mm.
is not when you are actually looking to hire. A lot of this starts very early on, and it can also help you refine your own understanding of what you truly need. So
Mm.
I'll just close this out, with one comment that another process we ran for another fractional role in a different function, we actually ended up realizing that we don't need a senior executive position in that function right now. We are better off getting a senior manager position. And that not only helped us manage our cash flow, but very importantly, avert, a wrong decision at this stage of the cycle. And
Mm.
so, those are the things that we can learn from those kind of fractional engagements, and work our way out.
I think very practical advice. And I really like what you've mentioned about fractional hiring, which I think maybe AJ has quite a bit more experience in as well.
Yeah, I think, look, it's really refreshing to hear Sujit talk about. I use the phrase over and over, which I'm a big fan of, right talent, right? It, I'm going to be a bit provocative here when we say, when we talk about talent and affordability, just like we talk in industry about leading and lagging indicators, right?
Mm.
You don't want to lead with, I want to hire affordable talent.
Yeah.
You want to lead with, I want to hire right talent. And so, yeah, just to build out on what Sujit was saying, I think, his point, I mean, I sort of indexed on four, which he's alluded to: timing of hiring. What are you looking to accomplish with hiring? You got to have an idea of what your org structure looks like. even if it's a frame, it's ever evolving, but you got to have an idea. I think the third element is how nuanced is this role, right? Is it a bulk, you want 20 engineers, or is it, hey, I need a key individual who knows the market, who's going to now create that awareness of my product among KOLs. I mean, that's a much more nuanced approach than a bulk,
Yep.
I need 10 salespeople, right? And then the last element, which again Sujit alluded to, is how do I attract someone who's passionate, shares that culture, sees the vision, and will stay and perform rather than a come in, come out, right? So, but yes, fractional. I'm a big fan of, as you get more into the nuanced hiring, you have to understand that there are a lot of experienced executives out there that are willing to try different things, right? Especially, perhaps I knew this from inside industry, but it's been more obvious to me now that I'm agnostic. People who have been in industry for 15 plus years are extremely open to trying different things, especially if they've been in one company for many years. They're looking for diversity of experience, right? So I would highly recommend, like Sujit's done, I would highly recommend C-suite individuals in this webinar consider fractional as a, hey, I want to do a 3, 6, 9, 12-month engagement, which really, I think fundamentally what it does is it allows two people to really feel what it's like working together. And at any point, you can pull the trigger and go, hey, you're working out great. I'd like to offer you a full-time role, but you get that vetting process of cultural understanding. It's a real de-risked method of trying to work together.
Yeah. No, I like what you've mentioned about finding the right person, right? And you don't always get it, or rather, companies don't always get it right the first time round. And it's becoming, I think, increasingly important, especially when it comes to hiring C-suite executives. And so I think really building on what you mentioned, right? What would you say would be some of the common either compensation structures or strategies that work best when hiring for these specific high level and important C-suite level roles and advisors?
Yeah, I'll start with what doesn't work best, which is don't force fit them on a budget, right? Don't lead with, hey, here's my budget, find me a person that fits this role, right? And I can tell you that often doesn't work well in the long run. Number one, whether you're working with a search partner or not, you've got to do homework as to what is market value for the individuals that you're trying to hire. Right? One of the most common misconceptions I see is cross-border hiring, where I see an internet, and I'll use the US as an example because US salaries are incredibly high, right? And you'll see companies coming from the outside and they'll say, well, here's our budget, find us somebody in this frame. That's gonna be a very difficult strategy, right? Now we'll find somebody, but that individual will not be the right person or will not perform. So I think number one, you've got to really understand, and that's why partners like us exist. We do that homework, often pro bono, right? It's not part of any sort of itemized service. It's just us teaching you about the market. But yeah, I would say, understanding where your market value is, and I think, Glenn, the common package is a base bonus, and depending on the function. I mean, if you're looking at highly technical hires, you're looking at a larger base with a smaller variable, often as an annual component of some performance, right? If you're looking at commercial people, which are individuals that are highly motivated by near-term commissions and near-term performance targets, then you've got to look at kind of a different split. And then I would say at the C-suite level, now individuals are looking at, well, what's the upside for me, right? Like I've spent enough time at corporate. I know the base bonus structures. Some of them are coming from long-term incentive type structures. So when they step down from a large company to a small company, they're used to this base bonus long-term incentive package. So you've got to find a way that still resonates with that sort of long-term incentive for them, but you just need to find that balance. You got to be like, is it equity? Is it options? What are you getting and when are you getting it so that you're going to be motivated? But I would say those are the main components, right? You've got the base, you've got the bonus depending on how that ratio fits, and then you've got that long-term, short-term incentive tag at the bottom.
Yeah, no, so I think in essence there's no one size fits all. It really depends a lot on the role and I guess the person and experience that you're looking to hire as well. And I think that gets me really curious as well. Sujit, how how do you as a founder balance scientific versus and technical hires with business and commercial hires? Is there like a formula you used similar to how AJ has explained this really
Uh,
well?
I wish there was a formula, right? Some of this is learn as you go, but some of this is also a function of, again, the stage of the company,
Mm,
uh, as well as what kind of team and expertise do the founders have and the existing team have. So, for example, at the early stage, obviously you're focused on concept, prototype, technical de-risking.
mm,
One of the important lessons I've learned, and this is my second startup, and first one as leading as a CEO, but a second startup. It's very, very important that even at that early stage of prototype development and scientific de-risking, do involve commercial expertise. You don't need to hire them as
mm,
full time, but somehow either create an informal set of advisors who can help you think through the commercialization process,
mm,
or create a formal board, depending on the situation. Or have one of your existing board members on the legal side have deep commercial experience. So again, different ways to approach this. But the reason I highlight that is, having a cool technology is just one element.
mm,
You need to think about, and this is obviously not news to MTI cohort members, but it's important to reiterate. You need to understand the reimbursement dynamics
mm,
and making sure, very importantly, what your business model is going to be,
mm,
what is a realistic price point in the market, but how is your product going to be handled? How is it going to be shipped? What are the things that you need to think about? And the core objective of this at this stage, at an early stage, is to make sure you are aware of the major pitfalls and identify major red flags. Because by the time you get through regulatory approval, if you then start realizing, oh, we should have approached it or we should have packaged it differently
mm,
because customers want this kind of configuration, it's kind of too late. And you will end up some very costly dollars, wasting costly dollars if you don't do that. So my biggest advice is at an early stage, make sure if you're a technical scientific founder,
mm, mm,
make sure you have an advisory board or informal network of commercial people who will help you think through the different stages of commercialization. Don't ignore that. If you are a commercial leader, make sure you are compensating with the right independent technical expertise, and you bring in that right hire, right? So it's really a function of that. And my core principle always has been in building high performance teams is you want diversity of experience and perspectives in your team so that you can challenge each other across the board. So for example, when I first joined Guider as an incoming CEO, I noticed we have a very strong engineering team, but we didn't in the team itself we didn't have deep clinical expertise. And so
mm,
one of my first hires, even though it was a commercial role, was somebody who had a nursing background, who then moved on to commercial leadership roles. And that's how I combined, and brought in that clinical expertise inside the organization very early on. So again, different ways to approach this, but I would highly encourage having the right mix of commercial and technical expertise informally and formally.
mm. No, I think you brought up a good point as well. I think it's especially relevant for founders who come from a more technical background rather than a business background. And it's a profile that I think we see especially in younger startups as well. AJ, any best practices in determining how co-founders can share initial responsibilities and leadership tasks, especially if they are from a more technical background?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, it really comes down to, I think co-founders have to be quite aware, either self-aware or aware in a collective, what their main strengths are,
Mm,
right? I mean, recently I've been dealing with a client where there's one individual that has commercial savviness, not experience, but affinity. Another individual is a physician, and then there's another individual who's much more in the sort of the day-to-day operations sort of expertise, right? And what I really like about them is they themselves decided, all right, I'm gonna do commercial, I'm gonna do clinical, I'm gonna do ops, but maybe it's not always smooth like that, right? But I think it's important in a co-founder setting, you've got to decide and you've got to pick a lane. It's totally fine if you want to change that lane, but lane discipline, just like driving, lane discipline is relatively important, right? This is really important because everybody has to complement each other. If an individual is jumping between lanes at the leadership level, it actually is very stifling to the organization, right? But I would say, to your phrase, best practices, what I've seen done well, I've seen many companies with highly technical co-founders, but one inevitably steps into the CEO with a mutual decision, perhaps even guidance from the board, and the other individual either takes a tech role, i.e. CTO, CSO, Chief Scientific, or sits in a COO role where that individual is managing ops, the day-to-day operations of the business, while the other person's doing board-facing, stakeholder-facing, cap raising, all of that stuff. So, and then them harmonizing between each other to kind of stay within those lanes. Those are some of the best practices that I see.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that can potentially increase the synergies between founders as well, as they move towards that common objective. I also wanted to maybe cover a little bit more on, let's say there is a vacant C-suite spot, right? And you do hire a really strong talent, like what Sujit has done, and AJ, like what you have advised sometimes. And when we attract these strong talent into the organization, right? Maybe it's a question for both of you. What have you found to be really some of the more effective ways in keeping them engaged and committed, especially when the company grows really, really quickly and resources are extremely limited?
Go ahead, Ajay.
Okay, all right. So, Glenn, I think, one of the things that I like to share often is that the candidate experience doesn't begin when the candidate has started with the company. And I really stress on that because whomever you're onboarding or interviewing or screening, that experience that person feels culturally, which is your company's DNA, needs to start right from the very first call. And I highly suggest, not just because we're in the search business, but I always tell teams and hiring leaders, really spend time getting to know these individuals, because otherwise, if you're just sort of posting a job, you're just doing an interview, and then you're just onboarding, all of a sudden this person's first cultural experience begins with the onboarding, right? So one of the things that I always tell people is whether you're working with a search partner or doing it yourselves, which is fine, regardless of whatever stage you do it, but think of the experience from that beginning process. The second thing is, I would highly recommend when you're bringing people, and especially for critical hires, and I know Sujit will, has his own experiences with this. When you're hiring, for example, a commercial leader for the business, that's a really important hire, right? It's I don't want to scare people with the make or break, but it is a very important hire. And when you stumble in that, it takes a long time to recover from a mishire, right? And if there's any sort of energy sent out into the marketplace with this mishire, that's really difficult to recover from as well, right? So what's really important is you've got to find out what the person you're interviewing and the person you're considering to bring on, you've got to really understand what that person's motivation is. And I think especially because Sujit alluded to this earlier, we work with a lot of individuals coming off of big strategic roles. And if they're looking to take a role with a startup, we often ask them, why are you actually doing this? And that's not part of the comp discussion or any of that stuff. This is a motivation discussion. And you almost want that individual to be ultra clear. You've got the right passion, the right culture, the right time in your personal life to make this transition. Because if there are oddities, if you're just exploring, stay exploring, right? But you've got to make it work and harmonize with everything. So look, outside of the frills, I would say the psychology of why an individual is choosing an opportunity is incredibly important to vet, and that's kind of my early statement.
Yeah, and if I may add and build upon what Ajay just said, the other aspect to think about this is even before you onboard, as part of your interview process, you should always be exploring what is that individual's long-term aspirations and midterm aspirations, right? And at least in my case, I always, whenever I'm hiring for any position, I'm always thinking, what would be their next role?
Mm,
What it would look like if they do well in this current role?
mm,
What challenges can I provide to this individual in the next role? And combine that with during the interview process, your understanding of their aspirations, you have a general roadmap at a high level to say, okay, if this person is doing well,
mm,
here's what the next step would be. And I'll give you a specific example, right? We hired a commercial person in Australia,
mm,
um, and we were looking at different ways on how to increase the responsibility of this individual now that we are growing the team.
mm,
We have had multiple conversations, and we will be giving that individual more responsibility as we expand in Asia Pacific to go from Australia to all of Asia Pacific on the commercial side, right? So
mm,
that's one trajectory. Now, it's never simple, right? People evolve, challenges evolve, organizational focus evolves, right? We had a strategy 3 years ago, which looks different. Priorities do change for startups.
mm,
So the other thing, very important, as part of the initial assessment and having these conversations, even once you onboard, is as the priorities change, being very transparent on what the company is focusing on, why.
mm,
Uh, and then making sure this individual understands that if we talked about going in a certain direction, if we're choosing to pause that direction
mm,
and not moving and going in a certain direction, why is that going on? And how long will that last?
mm,
I think all those conversations matter, but having a general roadmap on what are you going to do with this individual for the next 2 years, 5 years from now, if they continue to perform well at the time of hiring
mm,
is the basis for a long-term success.
mm,
And as long as you can work with this individual jointly and evolve, I think you are set up for that long-term commitment on of that individual to be part of your organization.
mm, mm.
Yeah, and Glenn, I just wanted to sort of, I know you love my formula, so I wanted to share a formula. Um, but I look at, and especially in the young medtech environment, I always talk to individuals from three phases, right? I look at them from what's your motivation? What's gonna make you, what's gonna instill retention?
Mm,
And something that's really important that we don't often think about until it happens. What happens when there's a transaction?
mm,
Um, and that transaction can be defined in many different ways, right? It could even be cash running out. That's a transaction. But it's important for people coming from larger organizations and different forms of stability. You need to teach them that there is an exit event of some sort.
mm,
And what does that look like? And what does your role look like at that point?
mm,
The more you pressure test this, the better you're going to get an individual who's committed, right? Because I can tell you, people who come from large companies don't think of a transaction event, right? They're like,
mm,
oh, I mean, I've got jobs for days and I've got people for days, but all of a sudden you're doing five people's work.
mm,
You don't have a clear path of growth. And
mm,
all of a sudden you're like, wait, so what happens if we get bought? Like, I've never really thought of that. So I often say, look at those three phases and then you'll really understand someone's motivation. And explain to them what their career looks like at an exit event, but you need to have those conversations.
mm. No, no, I agree with you. And I think the main takeaway, at least for me, is don't think about retention after you've hired the person, right? You need to think about this long term from the beginning, have really good conversations, transparent conversations, and you try to find what's right. Um, and I think that's also a good call out for our attendees as well. If you have any questions, just remember to put them in the Q&A and we will address them in about 23 minutes. And I think this is a good segue into the next part of the discussion, which is an equally complicated topic on advisory boards itself. Um, let's see, maybe Sujit, at what point in the development of a medtech startup should a founder or CEO start thinking about a scientific advisory board or SAB?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, the short answer is it depends, right?
Yes.
So here's the way to think about this is, and I'm generally, I'm generalizing this, but obviously it will vary based on individual situation. If you are at C stage and you're still developing your concept, you're pressure testing a prototype, and you have to think about what is the purpose of a scientific advisory board at that stage? Is it
Mhm,
technical de-risking? Are you looking to, if you are, let's say, a deep technical founder and your team is already have deep technical expertise, maybe that's not the objective.
mhm,
It's your objective to attract certain kind of investors, and so you're looking for some high-profile KOLs that will have that brand name. And there are certain KOLs and there are certain scientific advisors who have that pull, and investors get excited. So you have to really think about what is the primary objective of your advisory board at that stage.
mhm,
Be very clear. And then as you evolve, once you are now have a mature prototype and you're now going into regulatory submissions, clinical strategy becomes important, your regulatory strategy becomes important. All those factors come in. And so are you now looking for a different kind of scientific advisory board, right?
mhm,
People with deep clinical expertise in structuring clinical trials. Or are you looking for your advisory board members to be actually PIs, principal investigators or investigators of these clinical studies. So again, you have to think about what is the purpose, and how do you structure this, and then you go on to a commercial stage where you're now looking to commercialize. So again, depending on what your core strengths are, what kind of organization you have already in place,
mhm, mhm,
what are the gaps, right? Are you lacking deep reimbursement expertise? Are you lacking deep business model expertise? Are you lacking deep commercial expertise in terms of actually engaging with customers, right? Negotiating contracts. What is it that you're lacking and you're trying to compensate for?
mhm,
And where are you looking to really strengthen? And again, I would say, it's a mix of formal advisory boards and informal. uh, don't miss out the opportunity to talk to commercial people early stage.
mhm,
Don't wait after you submit for FDA to say, all right, I need a commercial expertise. And then post approval, again, your advisory board composition can change. Now you're looking at advocacy, you're looking for podium presence, you're looking for post-market studies and surgeons and let's say physicians who are going to be really advocating on your behalf in society meetings
mhm,
and publications, right? Is that the intent? Or are you looking now for evolving your technology and developing a next generation solution? And so are you now looking for, again, back to that scientific technical advisory? So it's a long-winded answer, Glenn, but I think the core objective should be defined at every stage of the company, and be very clear about how you're going to evolve
mhm,
your
mhm.
board. The board should not be remaining the same throughout the entire life cycle. It should evolve as the company evolves.
No, and it's a good point. And it got me really curious, right? Did your scientific advisory board change when you were just an Australian company and when you transitioned to expanding into the US, right? Because they're really far away, and the
Yeah,
markets are highly different.
it's it's a great question, and I would say this is one of the lessons we have learned. Initially, the company itself was very much focused in engagement with Australian experts,
Mhm,
and it was, while there was some engagement with US experts, it was not really deep and it was not recurring.
mm,
We have evolved that, to be honest, and I would highly encourage for companies that have aspirations to enter the US market, try to have a mix of US and your home market expertise
mm,
from the very beginning. And this is important. The FDA looks, for example, if as you structure your pivotal study or studies that are going to be critical for your FDA submission, for example, the FDA is certainly looking for usability with customers, U.S. customers. It's looking for U.S. representation, and trying to build that from day one will really help you structure things and develop your technology appropriately because clinical practices do differ market to market.
Mm.
Uh, Preferences do differ market to market. The dynamics do differ, right? Certain markets are, for example, very open to using CTs and image-based approaches. I'm just giving a specific example, and other markets are not. And so you need to have clarity from day one. What is your primary market? What is
Mm.
your secondary market? Make sure you have advisors from these markets from day one, and build that.
And essentially cover yourselves on both sides early on, right?
I would highly encourage that. And again, it doesn't need to be formal. Start with informal. Everything doesn't need to be formal. You can manage your cash flow and equity, outflows appropriately. But do make sure you are investing in engaging with customers from day one in your primary target markets.
Mm. AJ, anything else to add with regards to development of a good scientific advisory board from a talent perspective?
Yeah, look, Sujit, I mean, Sujit covered a really good range, but maybe I'll just offer different ways of looking at things.
Mm.
I always tell leaders the business board is your board of mentors
Mm.
and real, they're guiding you, they're complementing you in skills that you may not intrinsically have. So you're surrounding yourself with people who can steer and guide and advise.
Mm.
The scientific advisory board, I'm going to use the words you did use, they're advocates.
Mm.
They are speaking to the market. They will be people who will use your product, who will talk about your product, who will present on your product, who will do studies on your product. So look at it as two different ways, right? One is teaching the internal, one is projecting the external. And in a clinical community, we all know this, but I'm going to say it anyways, they will listen to their peers, right? What I would say is don't create a scientific advisory board for optics.
Mhm.
It's the worst thing you can do. And I think the Theranos days of the business, I mean, there were lots of companies. I've seen it myself where when I first started consulting, I saw companies with like 20 different medical advisors.
Mm.
And I was like, I'm not really sure why you have so many. Like I just didn't understand it, right? And from a cash runway equity standpoint, I can't even imagine what that cap table looks like when you have those kinds of people. So I would, just building on what Sujit said, be very clear on the objectives. I think his suggestion of having a mixed advisory board is superb because you also, I know that he was talking about the subtext here, but you also manage egos, right? If you have a heavy US advisory board, you'll get a very heavy American perspective, right? But if you've got your home entity is Australian, it's beautiful to have Australian KOLs and US KOLs because it creates a real nice harmony of, hey, this clinical world is vastly different from this, but we've got leaders in both spaces who are advocates, right? So really I'm summarizing with, I like Sujit's suggestion of talk to people early. You don't have to formalize things right away, and that's a very key thing. Lots of advisors are often doing partnership studies with you. You don't even have to offer them stuff sometimes, right? They're just involved in a trial or a pilot or something, and they're happy to be an advisor. Personally, I would treat equity as gold and not offer it. I would do everything else, right? I would offer various other ways of doing things to hold equity till the very last. And then of course, like offering things that sustain, but I would keep things as what's market relevant, what's clinically relevant, and keep your boards small and tight till you need to expand. Like just be very tactical with it because the people that you choose, you want them to be amplifiers. You just don't want a whole bunch of people that do nothing. And that applies to both kinds of boards, right? The last thing you want is all these people sitting on a board and they don't even show up and they don't even discuss and they don't even advise. So that just becomes top heavy, really.
If I may just add, right, build
Yeah,
upon your
please.
about equity, just in terms of compensation, right? For early stage startups, it's easy to give equity because you want to manage cash.
Mm,
But besides, it being gold, and it is literally gold, that's for founders at least, that's the most important thing. Um, it's very important to also have few other considerations. One is the FDA has clear guidance
mm,
on compensation of physicians, especially for clinical studies that are going to be pivotal for as that are going to be part of the pivotal to the submission.
mm,
There's very clear instructions on how they're going to view bias coming from physicians who have equity ownership of companies and who have equity upsides. And so you need to really follow that guidance and make sure you are not offering to equity to physicians who are likely going to be targets for doing these studies, for example.
mm,
The other consideration, it's not often talked about, and very few people know about this, but if you look at the largest health systems in the US, for example, many of them ask as part of your contract signing process, contract negotiation
mm,
process,
mm,
they're asking for do you have physician owners? They ask for equity cap structure details, particularly for private companies, because there's a lot of sensitivity both from OIG, which is the Office of the Inspector General in the US, as well as these hospital systems about conflict of interest.
mm,
Are physicians who have substantial equity owners, they have substantial upside, and so are they advocating a particular technology and there's bias coming in. And it can slow down or negatively impact your contracting process with some of the largest health systems.
mm,
And so it's super important that you keep that in mind and you avoid that conflict. Third, very important, if you're looking at as one of your exit potential is a strategic acquisition, strategics are looking for who are the KOLs who are advocating on your behalf, right?
mm,
So who's on your board, who's on your scientific advisory board, who's using your product. But at
mm,
the same time, they're also looking at are these physicians compensated for using your product?
mm,
And they know your early adopters are likely, there's a high probability they have some equity compensation. They actually tend to discard that input because they know those physicians are going to be advocating strongly
mm,
on behalf of your product. So you need to understand if as you commercialize, make sure that your early adopters are not just surgeons or physicians or clinicians who have equity ownership in your company. You actually have unbiased usage. Just early advice, because again, that can delay your exit timing. Because you need to have a clean slate to get strategics excited. So all those are considerations that you think about compensations. Just don't think equity, let's minimize cash outflow. Just think about other ways, other considerations.
mm. It's, I think, an additional thing for already busy founders to think about. And if you clearly have thought about this very carefully as well. Um, and I'm curious, so how do you utilize your scientific advisory board? Because I think like what Asia has mentioned and you've alluded to as well, I think there are a lot of companies that build impressive SABs, but they could sometimes be underutilized, right? So how can a CEO really work better with their SABs to maximize the value that they
Yeah, I would say, it's a mix of what we have done plus also some learnings to be very transparent, right? One of the learnings is we have not really done, maximize the utilization and the potential of an SAB, just to be fully transparent. And why do I say that? So typically, what happens is you create the board, informal or formal. You're engaging with them for certain feedback when you are in different stages of development. Oftentimes, you're waiting for a very late stage before you come in front of the surgeons or clinicians. I would advocate engage with them early. Obviously, you need to be protective of your IP, so you need to be careful and need to take the necessary precautions and all that. But engage with them early. Get early insights. Secondly, try to build that personal connection and spend time with them in having group discussions
Mm,
on not just the product, but just think about everything related to adoption.
mm,
What are the barriers you're going to experience in getting through this in hospitals? What kind of evidence would the hospitals require? How do you think, if you were to ask them to champion your product, what is it that they need to
mm,
champion a product within their health system? And really engage with them throughout the journey, empower them with information, and really maximize their own interests, right? A lot of these advisors are interested in being seen as subject matter experts, as leaders who adopt technology early on. They want to be presenting at podiums. They want to be seen amongst their peers as, hey, these are leaders who really are at the cutting edge of their profession. How do you enable them in meeting those aspirations? And
mm,
again, these are not compensation, these are other soft aspirations. So engaging with them throughout the journey, having multiple conversations, building those relationships helps you uncover those aspirations and helps you better align and utilizing them. And also, you know, when you build that integrity and confidence, there are ways that they open up. For example, we have one surgeon who just sent us his entire list of all his residents and fellows who has trained with him over 20 plus years, saying, I will advocate on your behalf. You need to go and demo this product to all of my residents fellows. What a strong opening
mm,
and what a strong
mm,
advocacy, right? Besides your hospital, you now are approaching, a long list of other potential customers. But this took time
mm,
because they need to build confidence in you, in the team, in the technology. So that interaction need not be just one time or just focused around a particular event. It needs
mm.
to be built over time. So it's a long-winded answer, but hopefully that gives you a sense of how to truly maximize that potential.
Yeah, and I think it's really just beyond the compensation and what you put together, right? It's beyond equity, it's beyond cash. It's really that relationship that you're talking about and I think that value alignment that people would then want to help you and advocate for you and put themselves out there and give you suggestions on who to meet and all that as well.
If I may just take 30 seconds again, just to emphasize that piece, which is for them, they are putting their reputation at risk.
Mm,
And so you need to make sure that you have built the confidence. But at the end of the day, they are in a profession to help patients.
mm,
So they are genuinely interested in advocating on your behalf if you actually work with them and make sure that there's alignment on patient improvements, right? Those are aspects that often get missed out because
mm,
you're so focused on milestones as a startup CEO. Hey, we need to do the study or we need to get X amount of traction. You're actually missing out on the soft objectives. So I think that's something important to consider.
No, good point. And maybe the last question will be for AJ. And that's essentially, I think, we've talked about a lot of things, right? And I think that only goes to show that founders have 1,001 things to do. Uh, and this just adds an additional 1,001 maybe. Um, but if a founder maybe is not too well equipped to build one like this, do you think that a talent advisory a company like yourself can help them?
Look, I think you're setting me up for the answer, right? And yes, I would say yes. But you know, to the point that Sujit made, I think if you're looking at adoption and traction, you're going to be speaking to physicians of some form, anyways,
Mm,
right? And depending on, again, what is your desired outcome, at some point you're going to be doing validation.
mm,
At that point, you're talking to individuals who are going to run they're going to be interested in some form of evaluation, whether it's a 5 patient study or a 500 patient study. Clinicians and physicians are looking at how can we do some research, how can we validate what this offering could be. Those individuals are scientific advisors, right?
mm,
So I feel like, I mean, what we need to stress is founders don't have to think, it's not a zero-sum game. Like you started these conversations already. So think of those individuals as your early advisors. Then the question is, can I engage them in some form or fashion? What does engagement look like, and how do they want to be part of this venture? I really like what Sujit was sort of alluding to is you got to understand what is that value alignment. I think, Glenn, you used that phrase. Because look, I've been, like Sujit, I've been on the industry side. I've been in various therapeutic conferences where I've seen an individual stand out and the very first slide they present is their disclosures. And it's like a 2-slide disclosure of all the companies they're working with. And you can see what happens reputationally in that community. They're like, well, this person's just a spokesperson, you know what I mean? So you as a founder, and especially as a young founder or as an innovative founder, yes, it's 1,001 tasks, but reputation is everything, right? And you've got to do the homework to find out if the person you're aligning with is a good representative of what you're trying to do. So I guess that's my real, yes, these tasks seem to pile up, but I would compartmentalize these things as these are the important things to be done for these periods, right? And it's really important when you're entering markets like the US, you really need a clinical strategy. And that strategy involves not just trials and all of that, but also who you engage with as an advisor. So, I mean, I'm just kind of building on the fact that they don't have to be complicated. They just have to be sort of one step at a time per what you're looking to accomplish,
Well, gentlemen, I think that's really good advice. Thank you so much for your stories and I think your heartfelt advice to the companies. We are very near the hour, and maybe we can close with after today's discussion, right? Do you guys have any final tips or advice that you would like to offer startups when they think about just their overall talent and people management strategies? AJ, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I think maybe as a summary of some of the stuff we've shared, right? I would say maybe the two biggest things I've learned from working with companies. I mean, I used to be a hiring leader for many years, but I was very myopic. I mean, I only thought of in my company and building my teams. But when I stepped out as a search partner, as an advisor, I've seen large to small, I've seen good practices, bad practices. I think the two things that I love to sort of share often is please don't wait till you absolutely need people. Like start thinking about things early. I know cash and all of that is always a constraint, but cash doesn't limit your thought process and cash doesn't limit your strategic thinking. You can draw frames, you can start thinking about things earlier the better. And often, again, Glenn, since you call me the formula guy, I often look at how far out from entering a market. So one of the good rules that I've seen good companies do or interesting companies do is 24 months out from market entry, they start forming structures of what that market structure, market org will look like. So it's a decent formula of 24 months, here are the various milestones, let's start building what that frame looks like. So that's one. And the second thing I'll leave everybody with is moving too slow or moving too fast. They can both be quite dangerous, right? I've seen companies, often we see companies moving too slow, but I've seen just as many companies move way too fast. Sometimes they'll build 20, 30, 50-person sales teams before they're even really ready to commercialize. And there's nothing worse than reputationally for a company to go, oh, we hired all these people, now we have to let them go because there were no favor. Now, Sujit and I have experienced this with large companies. I mean, internally this happens, but for a startup, often it's really a killer. Like you don't want that reputation in the marketplace where you're known as this balloon hiring company that literally had to let people go. So maybe I'll just leave people with those two things to kind of think about.
Golden words of advice. And I think Sujit, you've been expanding just right. What are your closing thoughts?
Yeah, so look, I fully agree with Ajay, and it's an ongoing process, right? You always learn and you improve. I would say very important, both for the scientific advisory piece as well as talent, cultural fit. I cannot stress this enough. Take the time to find the right people to work with. It will have a disproportionate impact on your success, and it will minimize the amount of post hiring stress that you might create for yourself. So if there's one word, I would say cultural fit, focus on that. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. Thank you, AJ, and thank you, Sujit. For our cohort companies, stay back for the next half an hour as we go into a exclusive Q&A session. And we would bid our online audience on YouTube and LinkedIn goodbye. Thank you so much. And if you would be keen to know more,